Well, as you know, companies have slogans or catchphrases. And I'm going to read a couple of them that I think these are pretty well known. See if you know this one. Just do it. Who is it? Nike. All right, pretty obvious. What about this? Every kiss begins with K. All right, a few people didn't know that one, but yeah. How about like a good neighbor?
Stay far there.
All right. See, I didn't even have to ask who was there. You knew. All right. And do you know what gives you wings? Okay, we may be asking the younger people that question. Yeah, Red Bull gives you wings. It's an energy drink, for those who don't know. But here's another one that you probably have not heard. A plumber had this on the side of his van. It said, "There's no place too deep, too dark, or too dirty for us to handle." If you think too much about that, that's not a pretty picture. But, ironically, that statement is fitting when speaking of God working in our lives. First of all, there is nothing that He can't handle. He is the almighty, one true God. He is sovereign. He holds this world, this universe, everything together. And He works in the world, and He is in control. And secondly, He reaches down into our lives. No matter how deep, dark, or dirty the situation is, or our sin is. And He gives us grace. He forgives. He gives life. He supports us. He gives significance. And He blesses according to His will. And we, His people, the recipients of His grace, His children, we cling to Him and love Him. So as we continue to look at the story of Jacob, also known as Israel, but when we look at Jacob and his family, we see that God is still working, and He is leading, and He is helping His people. He's giving grace from His vast resources. Because everything is His. And He's in control. And He gives grace. So we begin this morning, Genesis chapter 45 and verse 16. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts and go back to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. And you, Joseph, are commanded to say, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Have no concern for your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours." The sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the command of Pharaoh, and gave them provisions for the journey. To each and all of them he gave a change of clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 changes of clothes. To his father he sent as follows: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provision for his father on the journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they departed, he said to them, "Do not quarrel on the way." So they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob, and they told him, "Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt." And his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So you'll remember when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, he wept loudly. And we were told that all the nearby Egyptians heard him, and in fact, Pharaoh's household heard him. And so Joseph made quite the commotion when he revealed himself to his brothers and was hugging on his brothers and talking with them and weeping. And Pharaoh is told what happened, what this commotion is all about. He's told, Joseph's brothers have come. And so Pharaoh tells Joseph to have his family come live in Egypt. But there's more. He tells Joseph to give them wagons to carry their wives and kids and elderly Jacob. He tells them not to worry about bringing their stuff because that might make traveling harder, or might slow them down because they have to pack everything up, or it might just make them hesitate about coming down because look at all this stuff, we got to get it down there. So he says, don't worry about all that stuff, just come. And he says they'll be given the best land and food in Egypt. They will have everything they need. But why would Pharaoh be so generous, especially to foreigners who he's never met? Well, it's because of his appreciation and gratitude and respect for Joseph. You see, Joseph had saved Pharaoh's life. He had saved all of their lives. And this is Joseph's family. So he's going to be good to them because of Joseph. And so Joseph does what Pharaoh says, and then he gives all his brothers new clothes. Now, I want you to notice, clothes are an important thing in the Joseph stories. I mean, we can go all the way back. Where did this all start? Jacob gave Joseph a new coat or a robe, all right? And that upset his brothers. And when his brothers sold Joseph, what did they do? They stripped him of his coat, of his robe. And then there's other things with coats and robes that you see happen throughout the story. But this coat, the one that Jacob gave to Joseph, it was a symbol of Jacob's favoritism. But it was also a symbol of a broken family and of hate. And now this new gift of clothes from Joseph to his brothers is a symbol of new life, of forgiveness and reconciliation, and of provision and care. See, they are being cared for by Joseph, but it's really from God. God has brought about this reconciliation, and God is blessing his people. And along with the gift, Joseph gives an instruction. He says, don't quarrel on the way home. Or literally, don't be stirred up. You see, it would be easy, after all that's happened, to start feeling guilty or to start feeling scared about what Joseph might do or what might happen or what about talking to Jacob. And it would be easy to start arguing and maybe justifying yourself and blaming each other for all that had happened years in the past. Especially because now they have to go home to Jacob, their father, and tell him, Joseph's alive. How is that possible? Joseph is alive. What would you say to him? They may be thinking about that. How are we going to tell him? But in all this, Joseph says, you know what? Let it go. He says, don't let the past bother you. Don't quarrel. Don't blame each other and argue. Let it go. And don't be afraid. You've been forgiven. So you need to forgive. And also don't beat yourself up here. He says, don't argue. Let it go. And so the brothers, they go home, and when they get home, they tell Jacob, Joseph's alive. And they're excited about it. Joseph's alive. He's the ruler of Egypt. And this is the first happy homecoming they've had. This is the first time they've come home and there's not a brother missing. But so they're there and they're excited. So there's no bad news and no one's missing. But Jacob doesn't believe them. And when I read that, I have to wonder, does he think they are that cruel that they would tease him about this? Or is this just, it's such an amazing, unbelievable situation that he's just like, this is just too good to be true? But then he sees the wagons and all the stuff that they brought back. And he looks at it and he's convinced, because he can't think of any other reason, any other explanation for how they would have all of this stuff. They wouldn't have been able to buy it all, but look at them, wagons and probably horses pulling those wagons, and there's no other explanation. And at this point, he believes them and he's revived, and the joy and excitement of life return to him, and he feels alive. Now, let me point something out here. For years, Jacob's sons couldn't speak freely to their father. They couldn't be honest with him. And there was a barrier between them. Their relationship was broken and shallow. But now, with the truth coming to light and with reconciliation, they are free to relate openly and honestly with each other without barriers. Sin left unconfessed creates barriers and destroys relationships. The truth may be painful, but it brings freedom and healing. But now God has given them renewed life. The family is now whole, and they can talk openly, and there's no hate or guilt or fear. These things had hung over them like a cloud for years now. But now they've been forgiven. And Jacob has had a weight lifted off of him. His sorrow has turned to joy. You know, sometimes we may experience this kind of renewed vitality or joy in life, but in Christ, we've been given even greater renewal than that. Everyone who believes in Jesus has been given new life. Romans 6:23 says the wages of sin is death. What we deserve, what we earn by our sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. We have been renewed. We have been given life. You see, we were lost and hopeless and separated from God by sin, but now we are found. Now we are kept and held and loved by God, and we're His forever. God has given us renewed life. Well, Jacob heads down towards Egypt, but he makes an important step on the way. Look at chapter 46, verse 1. It says, so Israel, or Jacob, took his journey with all that he had. Interesting note, they went ahead and took all of their stuff. They were told they didn't have to, but they took all their stuff. Okay. So he took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to God, the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. And so he starts heading down, but why stop in Beersheba? If you remember, that's where Abraham's altar to God was. That's where he built an altar to God and worshiped God. Both Abraham and Isaac worshiped there in Beersheba. And so Jacob stops there to ask God before leaving the land. Because Jacob, he was supposed to be in the land, right? We remember that? I mean, when Jacob was leaving the land early in his life, God said, go and I'm going to go with you and I'll bring you back. And when you get back, Jacob vowed to come back to Bethel and worship him there. And then you remember when he came and then he kind of went back out and then he came back in and God said, go to Bethel. Okay, he went to Bethel. He's supposed to be in the land. And Jacob knows this. And also, remember, when Abraham went down to Egypt, running away from a famine. He went down to Egypt. He got himself into trouble. Remember? And then Isaac was told by God not to go down to Egypt, but to stay in the land of Canaan and trust God to provide for him during a famine. So there's a whole lot of trips to Egypt here, or the idea of going to Egypt here during famines. And so Jacob stops before leaving the land to worship God and to seek God's will. And notice one other thing, though. Why is Jacob leaving? He's not running away from a famine. He's going to see Joseph. So this isn't a lack of faith or a lack of trust in God. This is, I'm going to see my boy. And so God appears to Jacob in this dream, and he tells him it's okay to go. In fact, we find out it's God's plan. And remember what God told Abraham? Let me read for you. Genesis 15, verses 13 and 16. It says, "Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs," speaking of Egypt, "and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. So things are going to turn sour at some point, and they're going to become slaves. "But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you," speaking again to Abraham, "you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. And they," the nation, his descendants, "shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete." You see, this has always been God's plan. And now God tells Jacob to go and don't be afraid. This is how God is bringing them to that nation where they will end up being slaves and where they will grow into a great nation, and then God will bring them out. God promises to be with Jacob, and he will bring the nation back. And Jacob will die in peace, and Joseph, his son, will be with him. And by the way, the next time that God speaks directly to someone is Moses, when he speaks to him through the burning bush, when it's time for Israel to come back to the land. Let's keep reading verse 5. "Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob, their father, and their little ones and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons, and with his daughters, and with him, and his daughters and his sons' daughters. All his offspring he brought with him into Egypt." And then the following verses continues on with a genealogy of Jacob's descendants. But the point being made here is that Jacob went to Egypt with his entire family. The beginning of the nation all went to Israel. All went to Egypt. All of Israel went to Egypt. This is where they will grow into a great nation of people. But before any of that happened, what did Jacob do? Before making this major decision, Jacob sought God. He asked what God wanted. Now, if you think about this, Jacob, he really wanted to go see his son, who he hadn't seen for around 20 years. But he stopped to ask God. You see, he put God's will before his own. And I think a lot of times we forget to do that. We know what we want, but do we think about what God wants? Do you want God's support? Well, seek him and do his will. There is no place of greater strength. If you're with him, he's with you. If you're following him, he's leading you. And God is sovereign, and he's all-powerful and trustworthy. And God supports those who seek him. So God is with this family, and he continues to put everything together for them. Look at verse 28, chapter 46, verse 28. And he sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.'" Okay, just a few things to notice here about this reunion between Joseph and his family. First of all, Judah goes ahead of the family into Goshen, kind of goes on first and makes sure everything's ready or right and they can get there. Judah is still leading. He's now the leader of the family. Also, notice that Joseph hitches his own chariot. Now, who is Joseph at this point? He's the second highest in all of Egypt. He has servants to do that. And he wouldn't be expected to go out and hitch up his own chariot. But he does. He runs out there. It's like he's excited to see his dad and get out there. So he doesn't worry about all that propriety. He just goes out, hitches up his chariot, and takes off to see his family. And then Jacob sees Joseph, and he's at peace. All is well. And Joseph coaches his brothers about how to speak to Pharaoh. See, the thing about Joseph, God has given Joseph wisdom. And Joseph knows how to approach Pharaoh and what to say. You see, Pharaoh has already said that they could have whatever they need, the best of Egypt. But he's still in charge. Pharaoh is still in charge. And so Joseph is trying to make sure that his family can live in the best place for them, where they can have their needs met, have good pasture land, and where they can grow as a nation and remain separate from the Egyptians and keep pure as God's covenant people. And then there's that last statement there in the verses that we read. It says that every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Now, this is an interesting statement, because when you read that, your impression is, it would seem to suggest that Egyptians were repulsed by dirty shepherds, or, that they were outcasts, that they were hated, that they just couldn't stand shepherds and considered them a lower class of people. But the interesting thing is there were actually Egyptians who were shepherds and herdsmen. And there's nothing in Egyptian writings that suggests that those Egyptian shepherds were detested by the other Egyptians. So Bible scholars think that what this statement is saying, that this statement about shepherds speaks to the Egyptians' distrust of strangers and of transient nomadic shepherds. So people who didn't just settle down, but who traveled around and moved from here to here and just kind of went wherever they could find pasture land. And so scholars think that this is what it's referring to, a distrust of those types of people, those types of shepherds, and how they wouldn't want them settling down in or next to their cities. And so this idea is that, we can settle them way out here in Goshen. The Egyptians will be okay with that. Let's keep reading. Chapter 47, verse 1. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen." And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were." They said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. And so everything goes according to plan. The family is officially welcomed by Pharaoh, and Joseph and his brothers respectfully plant the idea of them living in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh offers them the best pasture land, which is in Goshen. And then he offers the brothers opportunity for advancement. You see, probably because of his respect for Joseph, for Joseph's wisdom and his management skills, he thinks, well, Joseph's brothers might be skilled as well. And so he says, if there's any of them that are really good, have them keep my animals. You see, he wants the best people working for him. But all in all, Joseph's family receives special privileges. Israel is treated well by Pharaoh. Verse 7. Then Joseph brought in Jacob, his father, and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? He must have been able to tell he was old. So he asked the question. And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. So this is the thing that jumps out to me right there in those verses. Jacob blesses Pharaoh twice. Now, why is that such a big deal? Why does that jump out to me? Because normally, the greater blesses the lesser. The one in the higher person, the person in the higher position blesses the one in the lower position. But here, Jacob, who is the weak foreigner who needs Pharaoh's help, blesses Pharaoh, the king. The king who even thinks of himself as a god. We have Jacob blessing Pharaoh. But it's interesting, Pharaoh doesn't balk at this. And it might be because of Jacob's age. He notices Jacob's age and he asks specifically about his age. How old are you? You see, Egyptians and the pharaohs, they were very interested in living a long time. In fact, they even wanted to live after they died. That's what the pyramids are for. They were obsessed with long life. And so it seems that he was impressed by Jacob's age. And of course, that, Jacob's long life, is a blessing from God as well. But what we see here is that the insignificant, the needy, the outsiders are honored. God gave them great significance. And God still gives significance to his people. Now, how does he do that? First and foremost, although we are unworthy sinners, we are made children of God. There is no higher position. There is no higher place to be. We are made children of God. We are just regular people, and yet we are royalty. We are made children of God. We belong to the King who reigns forever. And then secondly, God also honors and rewards those who honor him. And sometimes he even gives people great significance in the eyes of the world. Think of someone like Billy Graham, who had very humble beginnings, born, raised on his family dairy farm, and became an advisor to presidents. He influenced businessmen and teachers and leaders around the world. And most significant of all is he was used by God to share the gospel to millions of people around the world. And he led many people to a saving faith in Jesus Christ. That's significance. God is sovereign. He's in control. And in his grace and wisdom, he gives significance to the insignificant. And as followers of Jesus, you might be next. How will God use you? Well, at this point, there are still years of famine left after this point, but God will bless his people. Look at verse 11, chapter 47, verse 11. It says, Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food according to the number of their descendants. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. So the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, in exchange for the grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone. And Joseph answered, Give your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said to him, We will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh. And give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. And for all the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priest he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, Behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall sow in the land. And at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your household, and as food for your little ones. And they said, You have saved our lives. May it please my Lord, we will be servants to Pharaoh. So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth. The land of the priest alone did not become Pharaoh's. Then catch this. Thus, Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. Okay, notice two things here. The Egyptians run out of money. And so then they sell their animals. They run out of animals. So they sell their land to Pharaoh. And they are happy about it because their lives have been saved. But because of this, Pharaoh becomes even more wealthy. He owns everything, or almost everything. Almost all the land of Egypt. Everything but the priests, what the priests have and what the Israelites have. And so because of this, he owns everything, all the land. The people then have to pay a 20% tax on everything that they harvest. So 20%, 1/5 of everything they harvest is taxed. It goes to Pharaoh. It's kind of like they're renting their land from him. And they're paying their rent with that 20% tax. And this tax was still in effect when the book of Genesis was written. But let me point out that Pharaoh is being blessed by God. But why would Pharaoh be blessed by God? It's because he was being good to Israel. Remember God's promise to Abraham? I will bless those who bless you. So Pharaoh was being blessed because he was being good to Israel. And then notice this. Even though the Egyptians no longer owned their own land, Israel did own land. It was given to them by Pharaoh. And so the Egyptians have to sell their land, but the foreigners owned their land in Egypt and were prospering. God is sovereign, he's in control, and God gives blessings. Everything belongs to God. And he blesses his people who are faithful to him. Remember that every good thing we have is a gift from God. Thank him for all that he's given you, and honor him with all that he's blessed you with. Which brings us to the last point. God's people cling to God and his promises. And this is exemplified for us here in Jacob, chapter 47, verse 28. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place." He answered, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. So Jacob has lived a good, long life. Of course, he also had many troubles during that long life. Some of those troubles came of his own doing, and some were not. But God used all of them to teach him. And in the end, Jacob was faithful. He never rejected God, and he never forgot God's promises. He knows that God will do what he has said. And he knows that he belongs in the land. And so he tells Joseph to take his body back to the land, back to the promised land, and bury him there. And he even makes Joseph swear an oath to do it. He probably does this to make it easier for Joseph to get away in order to bury him. Because Jacob knows that Joseph would have to get permission from Pharaoh to leave Egypt to go back to Canaan in order to bury him. But if he swears an oath, well, now Joseph is accountable to God. And that oath must be fulfilled. And Pharaoh wouldn't want to be the cause of this broken oath. But Jacob wants to go back to the land because Jacob is clinging to God and his promises. He wants to be in the land, even if he's dead. You see, he believes God. And though Jacob will die, he knows that God's faithfulness is undying. And in reading this, I can't help but think back to Jacob's stop at Beersheba when he was coming down to Egypt. I mean, he wanted to see Joseph so bad, but he also knew what God had told him and what God had promised. And he knew that faithfulness to God came first. You see, Jacob is clinging to God and his promises. God's people know him, know God. We love him. We cling to him and his promises. We know that this life is not the end. And so we live for eternity. And like it says in Hebrews 12, we run with our eyes fixed on Jesus. Our focus in life is Jesus. God is our priority. We seek him. We seek his kingdom. We seek his righteousness. So we cling to him. Or do we? That's the question. That's the challenge before us here. Is God our first priority over all other things? I mean, there are many good things that people will put first before God. Good things like family, like education, like a career. But what is your greatest pursuit in life? What or who are you most faithful to? What do you love most? Jesus said that the greatest commandment is that we love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. To love him with all that we are and all that you have. In other words, he comes first over everything else. As God's children, our calling is to love God, to cling to him. He is our priority. Our God is sovereign. He's in control. He's all-powerful, and he rules, and he's good, and he gives grace. Now, this doesn't mean that everything in life will be easy or that you will have everything you want. I mean, just look at Jacob. Look at Joseph, at their lives. They weren't easy. They had lots of struggles. There was lots of hardship. But it means that God is with us. And he gives us more than we deserve. And he gives us more and he helps us more than I think we even realize or recognize or give him credit for. He gives us grace every day. He is God. He is sovereign. He is able to do anything. And he gives us grace. He gives us what we need. So give him your whole heart. Seek him and his will. And cling to him and his promises.